Okay, alright, well good evening ladies and gentlemen and welcome to City Circle. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Imagine arriving at your airport, all packed up and ready to go on holiday, and suddenly finding that you're being interrogated by state authorities. Or imagine showing up at your check-in desk and finding that you're being told that your visa's been revoked. No, it's not some bizarre April Fool's joke, much as some people might like to think it would be. It's actually an increasing reality for people living in the UK trying to exit or enter the country. And the cause is something called Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act, and something which some of you may have heard of, but which is still largely under-publicised. It gives state authorities wide-reaching powers, even far more so than the much-hated stop and search powers. It allows people to stop and search and question people without having any grounds for suspicion or without having any sort of warrant. Critics say it's being disproportionately used against ethnic minorities and visible religious minorities, people with Muslim names, people with the wrong skin colour, people with the wrong clothing and wrong outward appearance. On the other hand, at the same time, the government will say that it's a necessary measure in order to combat the increased risk of terrorism in this country. So is this an erosion of our fundamental rights and our civil liberties? Or is the government right? Is this a necessary step and a small measure in the government's fight against terrorism to keep people safe? And should Muslims be avoiding trying to travel to the US altogether? Here to discuss these issues tonight we have two speakers. Yvonne Cremo is on my left here. She's a barrister at 15 New Bridge Street, specialising in criminal defence and with a background in human rights. Ajmal Masrur is on my right. He's an imam and broadcaster and an entrepreneur. Ajmal had his visa to the US revoked, rather surprisingly, in December 2015. Which obviously led to quite a bit of media coverage and a bit of a debacle with the US government. It wasn't all bad news, and it did mean that he was actually free that night to come to the City Circle end of year dinner, which conveniently enough is located just a couple of blocks away from the US Embassy. Please give them both a very warm welcome. Okay, so we're going to kick off with Yvonne. Yvonne is, as I said, a criminal defence barrister at 15 New Bridge Street Chambers. Prior to coming to the bar, she worked primarily in the field of human rights and legal policy. After obtaining her undergraduate degree from the universities of Sheffield and Hong Kong, Yvonne worked at the Ghana Centre for Democratic Development as a legal policy and governance intern. She acquired further experience of human rights at the European Parliament, where she was attached to the Subcommittee on Human Rights and was responsible for researching a broad range of regional and global human rights issues. She developed her experience in human rights advocacy while working at the Open Societies Institute offices in Brussels. Yvonne's going to talk to us about the legal aspects of Schedule 7, and then we'll hand over to Ajmal. So Yvonne, over to you.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank City Circle for inviting me to speak to you this evening. I'm going to talk to you about the legal aspects of Schedule 7 to Terrorism Act 2000. So first I'll touch upon the legal framework, then I'll go on to speak a bit about the concerns that not only lawyers and civil liberty organisations have, but even independent reviewers of terrorism have. And then also have discussion, if I have time, on some of the key cases which have engaged Schedule 7 powers. So to start with, Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act 2000 came into force in February 2001. And I think it's probably helpful if I talk about the position as it was when it first came into force in 2001 and the current position after amendments were made to the legislation in 2014. So the position under the original legislation was that Schedule 7 gave a police officer, constable, immigration officer or customs officer the power to stop, question, detain up to 9 hours and search a person at a port or border area who the officer believed was entering or leaving the UK, and for the purposes of determining whether that person appears to be a terrorist. So it sounds very wordy, but essentially to break it down, if an officer sees someone and wants to stop them and determine whether that person is a terrorist, they have the power to do that. Schedule 7 allows that officer to do that. And the striking feature about Schedule 7 is that the Act expressly states that an officer may exercise his Schedule 7 powers whether or not he has grounds for suspecting that a person is a terrorist. So some of you who might have familiarity with criminal law or common law principles in this country will know that usually if you're being stopped or questioned or arrested by a police officer, they have to have objective reasonable grounds for that stop or for that arrest before it can occur. Under Schedule 7, that goes out of the window. So a person questioned under Schedule 7, and I'm still referring back to the original position before the amendments were made, must give the officer any information in his possession which the officer requests. So if you're asked questions, you have to answer. If you're requested to hand over documents or any items in your possession, you have to do that. And any property given to the officer may be retained for up to 7 days or for as long as the officer determines is necessary for evidence in criminal deportation proceedings. And a person detained under Schedule 7 could also be photographed, strip searched, have their fingerprints taken, DNA taken as well. There was no right initially to have a named person informed of your detention or questioning, or to consult a solicitor unless the detained person was transferred to a police station. So if the person was kept at the port or the airport, there was no right initially to ask for a solicitor to be present. And finally, quite importantly, it is a criminal offence to refuse to comply with the questioning process. And if the detained person willfully refuses to comply, that in itself is a criminal offence which could attract a term of imprisonment and or a fine of up to £2,500. So I think you can see from the outset the reasons why a lot of people had very valid concerns when Schedule 7 came into force. Now, in relation to amendments that took place, they were as a result of the amendment to legislation which occurred in 2014. I won't go into the ins and outs of the different legislation because it's probably boring and only interesting for us lawyers, but the essential feature is that in 2014 amendments were made to Schedule 7 following criticisms made by civil liberty groups, organisations and also some litigation which occurred in the courts, complaining that the powers afforded to officers under Schedule 7 were too wide. So the current position now, in light of those amendments, is that the reduction of the time limit. So previously, somebody could be detained for up to 9 hours. That has now gone down to 6 hours. So it's still a significant amount of length of detention, but it has been reduced. Second, the right to consult a solicitor has now been introduced, and that right is in relation to any questioning, but officers still have the power to question someone even if a solicitor is yet to arrive, because they may take the view that the arrival of the solicitor or any postponement of questioning in order to allow for the arrival of the solicitor may jeopardise or prejudice the inquiry. So although there is a right to request and consult, that can still be postponed in certain situations. Third was the removal of the right of police officers to obtain what's called intimate biometric samples, so for example blood, urine, DNA. Now they can't do that anymore. Also, they're no longer able to search in intimate areas. Previously they could. And finally, now if you are detained, there is a review of detention at specified intervals. So in some ways there has been progress in relation to these amendments, but still, as I'm sure you'll see, the powers are still wide and potentially can be very intrusive. So it's unsurprising that organisations such as Liberty described Schedule 7 as breathtakingly broad and intrusive and ripe for abuse. Now, some of the lingering concerns that remain over Schedule 7, despite the amendments, focus on a number of key issues. And as I said previously, it's not only civil rights organisations and lawyers who've been complaining, but David Anderson QC, who's a barrister, and he's an independent barrister, so he's not attached to the government, but he's tasked with reviewing the UK's anti-terrorism legislation. And even in his most recent report of 2015, he highlighted that the amendments to Schedule 7 did not address three fundamental concerns. The first of those is the fact that no suspicion is required for the exercise of Schedule 7, including factors power to retain or download information. Second, the fact that answers given by individuals detained under power under compulsion are not expressly rendered inadmissible in criminal proceedings. I'll speak a bit more about that in a short while. And the third concern that he highlighted in his report is the need for clear, proportionate rules governing the data taken from electronic devices. Now, in relation to David Anderson's reports, they're available online, and if you Google Independent Terrorism Watchdog, that will come up and you can look for yourselves. But these concerns are important because even from the independent reviewer, there's a recognition that anti-terrorism legislation must ensure a fair balance is struck between individual and collective security. So the concerns are indeed valid. Now, just turning to a position in relation to reasonable suspicion, in what I term normal non-Schedule 7 criminal proceedings, as I said before, where there is a power to stop, arrest, and detain, the police have to show objective, reasonable ground for exercising that power. So whether it's following intelligence or surveillance, something like that, there has to be some objective grounds for detaining a person. Now, the requirement for suspicion or objective grounds is obvious because it's designed to be a safeguard against arbitrary use of any power, and that's in recognition of the fact that detention is a significant interference on a person's liberty. Even if it's detention for a short while, a couple of hours, it's a significant interference. And further, to ensure that the power is not exercised in a discriminatory fashion. Now, the code of practice for officers who are exercising powers under Schedule 7 does stipulate that selection should not be based solely upon ethnic background or religious beliefs of the individual. But, of course, if they don't have to justify or explain the reason for their grounds for detaining the person, there's no obvious means of policing that particular requirement. Further, where the code of practice contemplates that ethnic origin or religious adherence can at least be one of the reasons why somebody is stopped or questioned, and it could be a non-trivial reason, it could be the main reason, then that in itself constitutes clearly direct discrimination. And that was a question that was raised by Lord Kerr, one of the judges in the Supreme Court, in a case called Beggle, which hopefully I have a bit of time to speak about briefly. But the question he raised when pronouncing his judgment in relation to that case was that if an examining officer does not have to form a suspicion, how is his exercise of powers to be reviewed? Quite simply, it's virtually impossible. It can't be. And the concern on this point does seem to be valid because research in relation to the exercise of Schedule 7 powers has revealed that there's an imbalance in the use of Schedule 7 against ethnic minorities. So the Equality and Human Rights Commission, they did a study into this issue, and they examined the period 2010-2011. Unfortunately, that's the most recent data I could get in relation to this particular analysis. But it's quite striking, the results. And I'll just quote, an analysis of the race disproportionality suggests that Asians or individuals of other ethnic groups are 11.3 times more likely than white people to be stopped and questioned. Blacks were 6.3 times more likely, and mixed race 3.6 times more likely to be stopped and questioned. And the report also examined airport data for the same period, 2010-2011, again considering race disproportionality, but this was across 9 different ethnic groups in comparison to white ethnicity. And this detailed focus revealed that Pakistani, African, and what they term as other ethnic groups experienced the highest number of over an hour examinations and detentions. So, put shortly, individuals from those particular groups were detained for the longest periods of time. Now, I did some research just looking at the most recent government statistics for the year ending September 2015. And they revealed that even though there had been a fall in the number of people who were examined under Schedule 7 last year, for the same period of detention, the fall in the number of persons occurred across ethnic groups except Asian or Asian British individuals, which saw an increase of 2% for the year ending September 2015 compared with the previous year. The most notable falls were seen in relation to white people and black British, which saw respective falls of 37% and 30%. But it's clear that in relation to ethnic minorities, there are clear concerns in the disproportionate focus in relation to Schedule 7 powers. Now, going back to the second point in relation to the fact that you are required to answer questions put to you when you are detained under Schedule 7, and if you don't, quite simply you can be prosecuted. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this marks a departure from what us lawyers and what members of the public may recognise as important common law principles in this country, specifically the privilege from self-incrimination. So if you are arrested in relation to an offence, you don't have to answer questions if they may incriminate yourself. In respect to Schedule 7, again, that goes out of the window. And the difficulty with Schedule 7 questioning is that although initially you might not be suspected of being a terrorist, any answers that you do give to the border official or the police officers could potentially be used to initiate a prosecution against you or others. So it could have very serious implications in relation to future criminal proceedings. And the fact that you may not have the benefit of legal advice is, of course, a real cause for concern. And I'm sure many of you will agree that it's inherently unfair to allow answers given under compulsion to be used against you at a later stage, particularly when you may not have been properly advised of the significance of any answers that you give. I've been told I don't have that much other time. I was going to be moving on to some of the cases, and maybe in the course of question and answer session I can touch on some of the points raised in particular cases. But I think that's all I'll say for the time being now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Yvonne. For anybody who's joining us, sort of just since we start, there are some sort of spare seats down at the front of the room, so yeah, do make yourselves comfortable. Okay, our next speaker tonight is Ajmal Nasrullah. Ajmal, probably needs a little introduction. He's one of the country's most famous imams. He's known for TV appearances and starting the Al-Khamiyah website. In addition to that, Ajmal was previously trained as a relationship counsellor and has been delivering relationship awareness programs for the last 10 years. He's got an MA in Islamic Studies and has completed his early education at an Islamic school with renowned scholars. He's the co-founder of the Barefoot Institute, specialising in providing coaching and counselling services. Ajmal, we've got around about 10 minutes, so over to you.
Well, thank you, Yvonne, for covering the legal aspect. I am not a lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, but I am grateful to you for giving me the foundation on which I could express my own views and share with you my thoughts. But before I do that, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's good to be here again. I do like to say that not famous, but infamous maybe for lots of notorious things I say and get into trouble. And I believe in free speech, and I get into trouble in the mosques, I get into trouble in the government, I get into trouble at the airports. I'm doing pretty well. I'm banned from Bangladesh, I'm banned from Egypt, I'm being revoked, my visa has been revoked from America. I don't know which is going to be the next country, but hopefully not Britain. Obviously is my home. As Ben said earlier on the 18th of December, I was invited to go to the States. It was a Thursday. I was to lead Friday prayers in New York in one of the mosques and do a number of lectures and then come back. I had also added a few more extra days for holiday. I arrived at the airport as normal and check in, check through all the security gates, arrive at the gates to board the plane, and usually at this point I know the protocol. I give them my passport, they'll scan my passport, and literally red light would flash. I know this already, so they'll take me for what they call secondary screening, further screening to see who I am. Fair enough, I'm used to it, I've been to the States many times. This time I give my passport. Instead of just the red light flashing, somebody else appears and says, "Excuse me, hello sir, I'm from the American Embassy, I would like to talk to you." I said, "Sure, no problem, what can I do for you?" He goes, "Can I have your passport?" Takes my passport, he looks at his phone, taps some numbers, and he goes to me, "You can't travel to the States with this visa, your visa has been revoked." I said, "Huh? Visa has been revoked when?" "Well, you should have been notified." "When was it revoked?" He tapped on his phone again and he says, "Oh, I see the visa was revoked today." I said, "Great, so it was revoked today, I'm traveling, I've checked in, and you chose to let me know. Did you not know this before?" "Well, I'm really sorry, I haven't got a clue, I'm just a messenger," he says. I asked him, "Even if you're a messenger, surely you have some sort of a recourse for me, what should I do? I can't help you." "Call the embassy." I said, "The embassy is closed." Call somebody, but it's not my business. Anyway, I push him a bit more, and then he says, "Maybe you've done something wrong." He just walks off. Sitting there thinking, great, what do I do now? A Virgin Atlantic senior staff approaches me and says, "Very, very sorry for this experience. We're fuming inside. We know you." "How do you know me?" We see you on television. We know who you are." "And this is what they've done to you. We don't know what to do." He said, "I'm the most senior guy from Virgin here. If it was up to me, I'd upgrade you to the first class if that was something that had happened to you or somebody had done to you from my side. But there is nothing I can do. I can walk with you to exit if you like. I can take you out if you want." I said to him, "That's okay. I can follow the exit sign. But thank you." He goes, "But please keep the ticket. Maybe we could do something later." I said, "Okay, thank you very much." He was the kindest one in the airport. Anyway, as I leave, I tweet, or Facebook, whatever you call it. I just post out a message saying, "My visa has just been revoked. Hooray, back to London," or something to that effect. Instantly, I receive a phone call from BBC. One of the journalists who probably follows me says, "Hey, let's do an interview right now." So I do an interview on Thursday night. And after the interview, I receive a message from the States. Sorry, after the interview, BBC interviewer says, "We've been in touch with the embassy. Embassy has already got a statement ready. So they have given us a statement in your name." Wow, so they were ready for this. Okay, fine. So on Friday morning, I received a phone call. They said, "Oh, please, can you come in? We want to sort things out. We want to talk to you. We need to sort out all this. There's something terrible, blah, blah, blah." Very sympathetic. "Okay, when do you want me to come in?" "You can come on Monday." So I go to the embassy on Monday. When I arrive, two people take me. One person takes me down into a basement room with three other people in the room. All of them sitting there looking quite scary. Poker face, no smile, nothing. Not even an introduction. "Take a seat. Gentlemen, you've invited me to come. Could you kindly tell me why you revoked my visa?" He goes, "Oh, that's not our business. We have not invited you for that. We have invited you for you to tell us your side of the story." "I don't have a story to tell. You have revoked my visa. You tell me why you have revoked it." They refuse to tell me any reasons. Anyway, after lengthy toing and froing, they stay silent. They refuse to give me an ID, a name, a ranking, nothing. Absolutely zero. Apparently it's beyond their pay grade to disclose any of this information. This is what they say to me. And then I say to them, "Look, you're wasting my time. When you're ready to talk to me really and you're prepared to tell me the reason why you revoked my visa, invite me, I'm done. Please take me out." Then he says to me, "Do you know this guy who," and he gives me a random name. And I say to him, "No, I don't know this guy. Where did you get this? Who is this guy?" "Well, we have reasons to believe that he is not a nice man, a nice person." Talking in code. Then I say to him, "By the name that you've given me, the combination sounds like he's a Bengali chap. I'm Bangladeshi in the same way. And if he is somebody who follows me as a result of my ethnic background or my public work in this country, I don't know, there are 30,000 people who follow me." He says, "Yes, maybe this is the person." "What do you mean? What has this person done and what have I got to do with this person?" So I say to them, please explain to me, or let me explain this to you. You're telling me you have revoked my business visa, B1 and B2 visa, that you gave me. You refused my ESTA first. You gave me that visa for 10 years. Since my visa, I've been to the States the 6 times. You have revoked my visa because you don't like somebody on my Facebook who I don't know, but you know enough about, and that's why you've revoked my visa. He said, it could be. And we will never be able to tell you this, but the only way you can find out whether you're allowed in the United States of America is by applying again. And I tell him, look, mister, you can have your visa, you can do what you like, I'm done. Pick up my bag and I just walk off. I can't walk off on my own, so they escort me out. I come outside, and then the next day, next is the weekend, Monday, Tuesday, all hell breaks loose, I think, from the media, BBC, Channel 4. Apparently my picture appeared in a newspaper in North Korea. That's very worrying to Bangladesh. My relatives called me up saying, your picture is in the headline, what have you done? I've done nothing. So obviously it was a big story for people. Why have they done this? And also before me there was the family of 10 who was returned before they were going to Disneyland. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just an example of what I call extraordinary power that our government and other governments are exercising in the name of preventing terrorism and protecting us. I don't think this is proportionate. I don't think this is winning the hearts and minds of anyone. I don't think it is creating a safe world. If anything, it is creating an unsafe world. Now, one logical question that I've always posed, and I've asked this to everyone, if I am a terrorist, would I make my life's mission to condemn terrorism 24/7? Would I live with a death threat from Al-Shabaab such that I had to move home, move my family from here to another country? Would I? Would I do this if I'm a terrorist, that I would do everything possible to reverse this idea or this extremist mantra? When I ask these questions to the Americans, they can't answer. They can't answer back because there is nothing for them to say in return. I've received several messages from the highest State Department officials to low-ranking officers in the embassy, privately emailing me saying, sorry, we know who you are, but we don't do anything. We can't do anything. This is between Homeland Security and you. It's Homeland Security who can unblock this or block this. We can do nothing about it. I received an email from a very senior officer a couple of days ago who said to me, if there was anything I could do, Ajmal, I would do, but there is nothing I can do for you. Absolutely nothing. And then in that email it says, even if Barack Obama was to get involved, he could do nothing about it. And I get the impression that actually there is an element of truth in what they're saying, because State Department and Homeland Security and the embassy, they don't talk to one another, and it's constantly one-man upmanship that goes between them in terms of competition. Who can score how many terrible blunders like this probably is what they get the highest mark for, but that's what they constantly do. We are all angry. Of course I'm angry. I'm livid for what they've done. A huge loss of earning, expenses, all the rest. But it also puts an aspersion on us as individuals. It creates doubt about us and our loyalty and our belonging. It makes you and I become target of mockery, people's hysteria, fear, suspicion. I cannot accept that as a human being. Why should I? Just because I'm a Muslim, should I have to submit to this kind of bullying, racial profiling, religious profiling? No, I don't have to, and I will not. I have not stayed quiet. In fact, a friend of mine wrote to me saying, maybe they would give you a visa back if you went quiet. I said, no, I'm willing to go to a prison if need be, if I'm guilty of a crime. Try me. But it's about my civil liberty, my right to be free. As a Muslim, I believe, and everyone, non-Muslim too, we all believe that we are all born free and nobody has the right to imprison us. We have the right to travel freely. Nobody has the right to restrict my travel. This invention called passport and borders, if you ask me honestly, I shun it. I think it's stupid. It has been created by the colonialists just to keep their wealth and property within themselves. The whole world is mine and yours and ours to share, proportionately and fairly. So these things don't create friends. These things don't create peace on this earth. It creates, fosters and festers for a longer period. Pain and frustration, which then leads to isolation. Isolation leads to resignation. Resignation could lead to people becoming extreme. And extremism could lead to people becoming all sorts of criminal, terrorists, or anything else for that matter. These are, in my view, the conveyor belt that have been put in front of us so that we could jump on it. And we need to fight it together, we need to fight it united, we need to fight it smart and cleverly. I believe majority of the world's population don't fall in this category. Majority of the Americans, I don't believe, support this kind of stupidity, unless of course you go by today's poll. There's a Pew poll out today which says majority of Americans support banning all the Muslim non-citizens of America. Apparently there is a poll out of this nature. But I think on a genuine level, if there was a conversation between Muslims and non-Muslims of American background or British or European background, most people would be very happy. Just to round up, I was invited to the President of Norway's house a month and a half ago, and I also addressed the Parliament there about Islam, about terrorism, about extremism. And Norwegian government had a very interesting take on this. They said, look, we don't buy into the neoconservative mantra, because the world currently is being run by this one mantra alone, and we cannot accept that. So as Norwegians, as the Scandinavians, we try and play the neutral role. So please tell us your perspective of what we should do. I believe there are friends out there who would listen, who would not be prepared to scupper or compromise a peaceful plan, a concerted plan, just because there is one terrorist attack here and a two terrorist attack over there. And finally, somebody said it earlier on. Yes, Muslims should be banned, maybe according to the Americans. If only Muslims had the same right to ban the Americans. Maybe there is an element of frustration in that statement, anger in that statement, that the world is really upset and angry about it. But the solution isn't in anger. The solution isn't in submission. The solution isn't in giving up our rights. The solution is us fighting back, saying no, we're not going to accept this. We need to, of course, engage our politicians, give them clear stark warning that election is coming up. You sign up to the Civil Liberties Charter or we will not vote for you. These kind of very smart tactics need to be applied and adopted by you and I. And to finish off as a Muslim, my ultimate aim is to submit to my religion, and my religion simply means submitting to a peaceful life. And everything that currently is being done is almost provoking a Muslim to not remain peaceful. Just think about it. You are an extremist if you hilarious. You know a recent story about Hisham Ali, the prison advisor to the government, the Muslim prison advisor. He was asked some stupid questions by his department. But later on I heard from another imam who was interviewed by a panel of government officials, and they asked, do you believe in music? He was quite surprised. Do you believe in man and woman to sit together in one place and not segregation? Do you believe in some other silly questions? And he said, I don't understand. What has that got to do with me applying for a job as an imam? They said, these are British values. If you believe that music is not allowed, then you're not British. If you believe that man and woman should sit segregated or in separate places, or there should be separation between man and woman, then you're not British enough. And then he was asked a question about homosexuality, and he was asked a question about Israel. And if his views contradicted the one that the panel was proposing, he was told that that indicated he was not British enough. Where are we going with all this? Where do we draw the line? Is it going to be a crime to pray 5 times a day? In fact, according to some conservative MPs, they've already tabled this, saying those Muslims who want to pray, they're a bit too fundamentalist for us. They may be a threat, and they may be extremists in veil. Yesterday's statement by the French Minister for Women, comparing Muslim women with scarf with the, she called it Negroes supporting slavery. Where are we going with all this? And then few others screaming at the fashion industry for making Muslim-friendly burkinis, etc. To me, we are living at a very dangerous time. Schedule 7 and all the other are just symptoms. The biggest problem is that there is a deep-rooted hatred, distrust, as well as ignorance about Islam deeply rooted in the society in which we live today. And if we allow this to continue, my fear is, and this is only a fear, what happened to the Jewish communities in Europe at the hands of Nazis began with these kind of vilification earlier times. I can show you newspaper cuttings. I can show you evidences that this is exactly what they experienced. And then gas chamber, execution, mass murder. I do not want to see one more in Europe ever. I don't want to see one more in any part of the world ever. But I'm afraid the way things are going, I can't guarantee you that it may not happen. And my father may have been right when he was telling me off when I was 18 or 19 for shunning his land in Bangladesh. He told me, son, give me some money, I'll buy a piece of land for you, just in case you get kicked out of England. I told him, Dad, stop being silly. I'll never get kicked out of England. But you know what? I can't say that with that conviction anymore. And that is a tragedy. I could say it standing from the pulpits and top of the roofs everywhere that this is my country, this is my home, and I still do. But I can't guarantee that you and I may not become the victim of what the right-wing, Islam-hating mantra, the wave that is sweeping our country has created. Suspicion, hatred, and division. I'm sorry to give you the bad news, but that's how I feel. Thank you very much.
Before the break, as I say, we heard from both Yvonne and Najmal. Yvonne obviously setting out the legal framework for Schedule 7 and for some of these sort of government powers to stop and question people coming in and out of the country. Ajmal obviously was able to flesh that out with his own personal experience and also to give some sort of insight and commentary on how he thinks that's sort of more broadly reflected in what's going on sort of in Britain and America in relation to civil liberties and Muslims. We're going to sort of allow you, the audience, now, to sort of take over and to sort of guide the discussion for probably around about the next sort of 30 minutes or so. Do you remember, of course, as well? Those of you on Twitter can follow some of the key points from tonight using the hashtag #CCTalks. So if you don't actually want to put your hand up tonight, you can sort of join the discussion there. Just remember to follow us at the City Circle. All right, and just before I sort of ask for show of hands, Ajmal, before the break there, you finished on what sounded both a very sort of pessimistic note, but also one that I couldn't help thinking sounded somewhat hyperbolic. I mean, you were trying to draw an analogy between the US's maybe overly robust security measures for determining who can enter the country, and trying to draw a parallel between that and the Nazi Holocaust. Is that actually a credible analogy to draw?
Of course, we could challenge that. I'm not saying it is conclusive, but I'm not saying American policies on restricting who can go and who can't go is equal to what the Nazis did to the Jewish communities in Europe. I'm talking about the negative portrayal of the Muslim community. I'm talking about the discrimination that is being faced on a daily basis. I'm talking about the attacks that are happening in the streets of Paris, Brussels, places like Switzerland. Who would have thought in Switzerland things would go out of hand? I'll give an example of what I received as an email from somebody straight after. As soon as this happened, I set up a website called flyingwhilemuslim.co.uk, and I invited anyone who has had experience of this kind of treatment to report their story. That's all I've done. I've done nothing else. And I've had many reports on that particular website. We have not made those reports or stories public because many people don't want to go public. They're worried about visas, they're worried about their job, they're worried about economic prospect, their businesses, they're worried about their relatives who live in America. Somehow I don't care about any of those. I have cousins and families live in America, but they're American citizens, and they can quite well look after themselves, and they know they've got a very loud and wild cousin on this part of the Atlantic. So I don't think that's a problem. But the story that I was about to share was one girl, she left this country, British girl, she got married to an American. Just listen to this for a second. She was studying here and she would go back and forth on a regular basis to be with her husband. Until the intention is she would finish her studies in 2 years and then move over. But in the first year she went several times. The second year, when she was going, she was stopped by the security services several times. And in one point she was told, we're going to allow you in for the final time. Next time you're not allowed in. Now what kind of a policy is that? So this girl, petrified of not being able to go back to see her husband again, abandoned her studies, stayed in America for 1 year to obtain the residence permit to stay, or spouse, whatever you call it, and then got the green card, and then came back to finish her studies 5 years later. Now why should a human being be subjected to such, in my view, barbaric treatment, violating her basic human rights to travel to her husband? Is she a terrorist? No. Has there been any credible evidence that she is? No. You see, there is no due process. That's the problem. If I'm being accused of a crime, I can't even defend myself because I don't know what the crime is. I don't know what the evidence is. This is not the rule of law, not the civil liberties that we have championed. This is not the civil liberty for which and freedom for which this country and many have given up their lives to preserve. This is absolute draconian, including America. The funniest thing is, American Constitution guarantees people's rights, and the very Constitution is being violated by some of those officials. And if these cases eventually go to the Supreme Court of America, I can tell you most of them would be given their constitutional right. So it is a strange situation. I think America is a brilliant country. For a Muslim, believe it or not, American Constitution and American administration, in the sense of the paper, in the administration in the principle sense, is closest to Islamic administration. The closest to the one Islam proposes. And yet we find there is somehow a new narrative that is being created. In fact, it's not a new narrative, it was designed quite well, that there is a clash between Islam and America. There isn't a clash. There's never been a clash between America and Islam. Rand Foundation did a paper when George Bush the senior became the president. It's called 21st Century Will Be the Century of America. And if you go and download that paper, still available in the Google search, you'll find one after the other. The strategies that they proposed are being implemented by successive governments. And that's my worry.
Okay, thank you very much there, Ajmal. Right, and we're going to open this up to you now and invite you to sort of pick up on sort of some of the points that both of the speakers have made there, and to ask questions. Just usual sort of rules of the house at the City Circle. If you could put your hands up, and I'll sort of come to as many people as we can. If we don't have time for everybody, I apologise in advance. And if you could sort of keep your points as sort of brief and concise as possible, please, just so we can get around to as many people as possible. Okay, yeah, gentleman over there with the suit.
First of all, thank you for both of the speakers for the excellent and insightful points you've raised. What I wanted to raise, because I'm a practicing lawyer myself, so a lot of my work involves challenging decisions from local authorities and really being able to hold them to account. And as frustrating as that can be, at least there's some sort of due process involved there. But it's quite frustrating for me on a personal level, where I see a lot of these basic legal principles which have been eroded very quickly, which we've really accumulated over a long period of time as a result of people campaigning and the change of public opinion. One important point that Sheikh everyone sort of said was that probably most people aren't in line with this. They think very differently and are probably against a lot of this. So I'm just asking both speakers their views on how we feel that we can use our knowledge of the due process and also public opinion to perhaps change the slippery slope in the direction that things are potentially going.
Okay, so the question that sort of maybe summarised and put in a nutshell is: can we as citizens in the UK sort of use the due process and our rights under the Human Rights Act and other instruments to sort of challenge some of these practices and these procedures? I'm going to give that to you first of all.
I would say yes, most definitely. The Human Rights Act, while we still have it, I know the current government has got plans for it, which includes repealing it. But the Human Rights Act has been a tool by which Schedule 7 powers has been challenged, and in relation to the key cases which have been in the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal, it has been on the basis that Schedule 7 infringes the Human Rights Act, particularly Article 6, right to fetch file, right to liberty under Article 5. In relation to your role as a practicing lawyer and other people who have knowledge of the law, including myself, I do see it as our responsibility to engage within our community, our media and wider communities, to inform people of their rights and the law. Unfortunately, it does feel like a bit of an unattainable object, the law and understanding rights for many people who don't have day-to-day knowledge and practical experience of the law. But it is the role of community groups and particularly legal professionals to reach out and make sure that everyone within the community is educated. And if there are any complaints or are any particular experiences that people have had, to bring that to the attention of lawyers who will be litigating these issues.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ajmal, I don't think you want to add sort of briefly to that on the sort of legal front.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so there is not much to say except to say
more
please.
just in terms of the public opinion.
I think public opinion must be altered. We must challenge. You see, politically I'm very involved. As you probably know, I stood for the parliamentary election in 2010, and I intend to stand again to just further these causes. To me, these are causes that make this country so great, and losing them would absolutely put us to equal to the banana republics that we condemn in many other countries. What's the difference between Sisi's Egypt and these draconian laws that we are seeing today? I remember this funny story that George W. Bush was told by Mubarak. George W. Bush was told by Mubarak, see, I told you many times you should adopt our tactics. Waterboarding, torture in prison, no rights, detention without trial, keep them locked up. We use them all the time. We've been advising you Americans to do them. Why have you been ignoring them? It's about time you did. This kind of advice George Bush was given, or mockery in a friendly way, given by the Egyptian Mubarak. I mean, this is what we always cringe when we see these countries do these barbaric things against their people. So I need to engage with the public. We need to stand in front of, if you ask me, we should all stand in front of the, as much as we can, in public, in front of the underground station, in our own local areas, giving out leaflets, information, doing TV programs, radio programs, writing for the newspapers, doing internet campaign, letting people know that Islam is not the problem. In fact, curtailing of our civil liberty and the neoconservative mantra and the likes of Donald Trump are the problems. That's what we need to tell the world.
Okay, thank you very much, Ajmal. Yeah, lady down here.
Addressed to you. We heard about the civil liberties in England, but your experience was in America. I have an American mother. I have travelled regularly over the last 25-30 years to America. I've been at university there. I've only been detained and had problems post 9/11. I've been detained 3 times out of 30 journeys, and I'm on a watch list. I think we have to be sensitive about why the Americans changed. 9/11 was something that is deep in their consciousness now and associated with Muslims. One thing that I, as a convert Muslim, am asked often, how can we respond as Muslims, I'm talking to heritage Muslims, when our Prophet is insulted? And I say, reach to the fear in the person who's attacking you. What I did, and I want your advice now, this is a question, how to behave in America when you're detained. I gave them total respect for the fear they have after the atrocity of 9/11. Total respect. And in doing that, I showed that as a Muslim, like 99.99% of Muslims, we have disdain for the people who do this sort of thing.
I entirely agree. When I arrived at New York Airport first time, and they took me aside, they didn't mistreat me. They asked me very basic questions. I had a good laugh and a giggle over these things. I gave them some some mint I was having, share it with them. They had a good laugh. One guy said to me, "Would you like a soda?" And he went and got me a Coke. So we immediately built a rapport. Then he said to me, "I don't know why they do this to you. Have a good time," and he left me. Let me go by stamping a passport. Second time, when I arrived, I actually went to the booth and I said, "Guys, don't waste your time. I need to go to the VIP room." The guy goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I get VIP treatment." "You don't know? It's in that room." He goes to me, "You know the protocol." I said, "Of course I do." So I made a laugh and a joke of it, right? But you and I can tolerate and make laugh and a joke out of it because people are afraid. But I'm told as a Muslim, don't be a victim. Rise above being a victim. Don't let your life be run by fear. For how long would America want to continue running its policies based on fear? Fear leads to nothing but more fear and entrenchment. I want to help American Muslims, non-Muslims, Muslims outside to overcome this. The world is ours, right? It's together, one world. You see, Muslims don't behave well. I know they don't. But non-Muslims don't either. Human beings have all types of people. Human beings have all types of people. When the Prophet is insulted, I say to people, so what if the Prophet is insulted? God can protect Prophet's honor. You don't have to do anything about it. Prophet never told you and I to die because of his honor. Never. In fact, the contrary. Muslims need serious exorcising. Do you know what I mean by that? Taking the jinns out of the Muslims. And the Muslims here will understand real ruqya is needed in the Muslims. But once you've done the real ruqya on the Muslims, with education and knowledge, the non-Muslims will also need the same treatment, I believe. Because those nasty people who have created the fear haven't done enough to balance. And to me, it's our duty to create that narrative, the more real narrative, the true message of Islam. When I said to a non-Muslim gentleman a few days ago, I was being interviewed on the Dublin radio, and he said, the problem was with Islam. I said to him, can I ask you a question? Have you read the charter written by the Prophet when he wrote to the monastery of Sinai, guaranteeing their protection? He goes, what is that all about? So I told him that the Romans were attacking the Sinai Christian monastery. When they came to the Prophet seeking his help and refuge, he provided them not just help and refuge, he sent an army, protection, and he guaranteed in his writing, from this day onwards until the end of time, every Muslim shall be duty-bound to protect the Sinai monastery. He goes to me, I didn't know that. So the more we talk about the life of the Prophet, the more we realize actually Prophet's message was a truly pluralistic message based on monotheism, true, but he didn't discriminate people just because they didn't believe. That's missing in our conversation today.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. I just want to sort of reframe the question slightly for you there, Yvonne. The lady was asking about whether, well, what she described as sort of the sort of cooperation and respect that she'd shown sort of to people and to the authorities in the US. We've talked, and you spoke a lot about sort of the rights that officials have at our airports to question and detain people. Could you just comment on what's the relative sort of merit of trying to be cooperative with those people? Is it going to sort of see people better off and sort of have people going on the journeys quicker in practice?
I think practically speaking, cooperation is always going to make everyone's life easier. I think the difficulty and the concern, particularly in relation to Schedule 7, and I'll bring it back in to this specific point I've raised before, is the fact if you're being asked questions which you, for very legitimate and understandable reasons, might not want to answer. So you're travelling, you arrive at Heathrow, an officer pulls you over and is asking you, where have you been, just seemingly out of the blue, because remember the officer doesn't have to explain why, the grounds on which they're asking you the particular questions, but asking you who you've been with, your relationship with perhaps your spouse, relationship with children, other family members. Very, very intrusive questions, which many individuals, being private people, might not want a total stranger to know. So there is a risk of cooperation, which, yes, that of course can help practically speaking, but also there's a very real issue of an individual person's liberty and the fact that they have an entitled to a private life. So any intrusion on that private life, there must be some oversight, and it must be proportionate to the measures which the governments and authorities are trying to attain. And that's what we have to be vigilant about, because it's all too easy to hand over power to the authorities, but we must be sure that that power is exercised in a proportionate manner.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a reminder, there are some spare seats down the front here for anybody who's joining us, so yeah, don't be shy. Hands up for other questions and other sort of points coming out of the discussion earlier. Yeah, gentleman down here.
Oh, I used to travel to the US regularly, and post 9/11, I had a similar situation, with Disneyland taking the kids, and I chose not to put my kids through any more, waited the 8-9 hours. I still cleared the security, but they started to put like a 4 or 5 X's on my boarding passes, the secondary clearance, and I thought we no longer wanted to do it. But there's a current article in the paper that 5 Muslim members of a family in Chicago, they got thrown off the airline because they said, there's a problem with the belts, or the airline used an excuse. So I was just to inquire about Schedule 7. The TSA, for the experience that I had, is very, very firm, strict, and you get your visas, you clear the TSA. That should be a level that's enough, you're now through. But then for the airlines, so passengers on the plane, they might not like, the Muslim families, with my family travelling on there, and then they take us off the flight. So I just wanted to ask that if for instance, previously I thought if I hold them financially, so once they start to look, they're being hit financially by being this profiling, taking a weighted hand, does it move away from Schedule 7, or now the airlines now have a free excuse, they're always using it, they're throwing Muslims off the plane because the passengers maybe don't like the way they look and that, but you can no longer hold them financially responsible because they've got to get up close to say something wrong was with your child's seatbelt, so we've taken you off this flight. It looks embarrassing, it looks ridiculous, and at the same time we've never seen, or I've never experienced, like a white or a Christian family, 2 kids or 3 kids, and a family taken off the flight. So with Schedule 7, is that separate? You've cleared TSA security, you've got your visa, you're on the plane, the airline takes you off. Is it legally very difficult to prove that nowadays you cannot hold the airline responsible? So look, we'd like £1 million payout because you've racially profiled us, and they will have that legal saying that no, there is something wrong with the seatbelts and that's why you were removed off the aircraft. I was just trying to say, legally, is it with Schedule 7, or are the airlines have like another schedule that they use, Schedule 8, to say now Muslims, you're coming off the plane, you've cleared TSA, it doesn't matter, we're using Schedule 8. Yeah.
It is a separate matter from Schedule 7. Schedule 7 is only a power that's extended to police officers or custom officials. Once you're on a plane, and if for any reason the plane staff feel that you should be removed, that's a matter of decision taken by the plane staff. It's something completely separate to Schedule 7 powers, because they're not authorised to exercise that authority. If you did have a particular issue, and you're concerned that you were only removed because of racial profiling or for an illegitimate reason, you of course can bring a claim against the airline, but that's not a criminal matter, that's a civil matter between yourself and the airline. And if they have, it's found in the court that they've discriminated against you for reasons of your race or religion, then of course the airline be held to account. They can't resort to Schedule 7 today or any other anti-terrorism legislation unless it's particularly relevant and they were acting on perhaps orders of the police in order to remove you from the aircraft. If that was the situation, it would be the police themselves that would be removing you, not the airline staff. So it would be more of a discriminatory matter that you'd be pursuing in civil courts.
So are there any sort of legitimate grounds under the law, either under the Terrorism Act or under other legislation, whereby airline staff can have somebody removed from a plane if, for example, other passengers feel uncomfortable, or they've got some maybe sort of unfounded suspicions or something? Is that something which the airlines have any sort of legal fallback on?
Not that I am aware of, not particularly under the Terrorism Act. If the airline has got any suspicions of any criminal activity, they can't take the matter in their own hands, they have to call the police. because they're not the police. They have to get some kind of authorisation or
But-
report the matter.
But reacting to the whims of sort of belligerent fellow passengers wouldn't be a legitimate offence for the airlines throwing somebody off a flight.
No. So you have situations where commonly people go on, for example, go to flights drunk and other passengers complain. Usually people will ask to leave. If they refuse to, the police are called, and the matter is escalating that way. So airlines do have discretion as to who can travel on their flight, and if they do have legitimate concerns, they have the right to ask you to leave. Or effect your removal. But if it's something in relation to terrorism or criminal activity, then it would be for the airline to report that matter to the police. They can't investigate criminal offences on their own.
As well, did you just want to add to that?
I have an image in my head at the moment which says, which is a hijab-wearing Muslim woman is being thrown off the plane for a drunkenly behaviour. Can't imagine that ever happening, but if it does, it will be headline news hopefully. A Muslim woman drunk thrown out of the plane for terrorism. It won't go, will it? A Muslim woman drunk. Anyway, has anyone else been through the same? That's a question I wanted to ask you. So so you've had bad experience with American travel, right? Just show of hands first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My God.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, don't be happy.
Put your hands up. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20 people out of what?
It's probably around about 70 or
70
80 here
people.
tonight.
What's that percentage?
I'm not brilliant.
34%? My God, 34% of and we did not pull you together in any organised planned fashion, very random.
The title had something.
Probably, but 34% of those who are present in this room, approximately, have had some sort of an encounter with with travel to America. Unbelievable. I'm not just rest my case. I rest my case for saying that. This is not random. This is a concerted effort by profiling, and we need to challenge that. Are we saying all Muslims are therefore subject to this particular extraordinary power that they exercise on us? I'm sorry, I'm not going to accept this ever. I'm going to even scream louder now after seeing our numbers yesterday. Please do go to the website and report your story. flyingwildmuslim.org.uk. Please report it. We need to compile as many stories as possible.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. Later down here in the
I had two experiences. Once when I was flying to New York, I got stopped again as I boarded the aeroplane. Another one, I was in Turkey coming back with EasyJet to the UK, and I was with a group of English people. None of them get stopped, but I got stopped. And this was a Muslim, and because I had the passport, I've got a British passport. This was flying back to my own country, and this was in Turkey. So I don't think it should be.
Just to clarify, did you get stopped in Turkey or in England?
I was stopped in Turkey,
Right.
coming back to UK.
I got stopped in the UK coming back from Turkey. In the UK. And I said to the officer, what do you want? He goes, where are you coming from? I said to him, you perfectly know where I'm coming from. He goes, I want to talk to you. I said, I haven't got the time. He said to me, if you don't want to cooperate, I can arrest you. I said, go ahead, arrest me. And he walked with me, he goes, I'll cooperate. I said, no, I'm not cooperating with you. If you've got reasons to stop me, then stop all the 300 other passengers. We've come from the same plane. You know where we've come from. Don't waste my time. And I just walked off. He followed me, and then I tweeted straight away. Guess what happened? Outside, 3 police officers were waiting for me. They received me outside. They said, hello, yes, Mr. Masroor, yes. We saw your tweet. Right? One of them said, Assalamu alaikum, brother. I'm from the Muslim unit. Can I take you for a cup of tea and make it up to you really? We don't mean to cause you any trouble. I said, no, it's no trouble. Trust me, it's no trouble, but don't do it again. But anyway, that's me.
Just, okay, I mean, pulling on the sort of serious point there, I want to throw this over to you, Yvonne. I mean, are there technical differences between what rights the police and the UK border agency have, sort of inside an airport and outside an airport? Can you be stopped and taken aside, sort of on the street or sort of on your way to or from an airport?
No, that's a good question. In relation to Schedule 7, it applies to ports of entry, so it's typically airports or other ports where you're entering or able to leave the country. If you're just on the street, just outside, you can't be stopped under Schedule 7. It applies, application is for ports of entry.
And that includes, just to be absolutely clear, that includes airports, does it include people travelling on the Eurostar?
Yes, because it's ports of entry, and if anywhere we can leave or enter the UK, it has the application.
Okay. All right. Various hands up. And if you've got a question or you want to ask, can you just put your hand up just so I can gauge sort of maybe how many more questions we'll get through? Okay. All right. I'll go to the lady down here and then to you.
My question doesn't relate to me. It relates to my brother. So my brother was flying, so he went through security and everything, and he's actually on the plane now. And he was asked to be taken off the plane by a member of staff. So if, for example, a member of staff comes up to you on a plane and asks you to leave, what are your rights? Can you say no, or do you have to kindly leave? What can you do? And he was told not to make a scene. I would have got up and made a scene and said, no way.
I mean,
no chance.
You'd be perfectly entitled to ask why you're being taken off the air.
She just said, can I have a word?
Okay. And no explanation given?
No, not whatsoever.
And did he ask?
I think he I can't remember because I actually wasn't there, but as he got off the plane, the border police were already there, waiting.
Okay.
So he was effectively sort of enticed off the plane by the airline.
I don't know, I don't think she was a seductress or anything like that.
But there's probably
in the broader sense of the word.
There's probably a request from the border police for the airline staff to come in.
No, the airline said somebody had made a complaint and said Schedule 7 was used, but he refused to answer any of the questions.
Was he prosecuted?
No, because he said he then, I can't remember what he said, but he said in Schedule 7 they try not to write things down, but once you're prosecuted they have to write things down, so they're trying not to get to that stage where they have to document it, and then he called a solicitor and then they had to document everything.
Okay, and what was the outcome for him? Was no further action was taken?
Nothing, he couldn't go on his holiday, he was stuck.
Okay, alright.
And let go without any charges pressed.
I mean, in relation to your original question as to whether, if you're asked to leave, you can ask questions, but ultimately the airline staff has a right to refuse you entry or passage on their aircraft, so you have to leave. And if you refuse to leave, then you can be removed.
Are you entitled to any compensation, anything like that?
I mean, you can bring a claim against the airline if you feel that you've been removed.
They always say it's not within our control.
Unless there is something in relation to suspicion in relation to Schedule 7 or other criminal proceedings, then that might have a bearing. But if you're just removed, no explanation given, you lost out financially, you can first make a complaint to the airline, of course, and if you get no recourse, then pursue a civil claim for recovery of your losses.
So that's obviously when you get in touch with Yvonne and her colleagues.
Yeah.
Okay, and the lady down here in the police presser.
Hi, Simon. The question is more about the whole Brexit debate, whether Schedule 7, we're better off having that as it is, or if we were to leave Europe, would we see something far worse?
Are we better off in or outside Europe? Specifically in relation to Schedule 7. Yvonne, do you want to give up on that?
I don't think it's going to have an impact on Brexit would have an impact on Schedule 7 because Schedule 7 it's domestic legislation. Of course, all domestic legislation has to be compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, which
you said they're looking to repeal.
Yes, but that's a separate issue from Europe. So the European Convention on Human Rights is a Council of Europe treaty. It's not an EU treaty. So even if the UK did decide to leave the EU, we still have the rights under international law, unless, of course, the government repealed the Human Rights Act, which, of course, would have a significant bearing in relation to our rights. But equally, there is still a responsibility for the government to respect our rights under the European Convention on Human Rights, because that is an international treaty that the country signed up to and is signatory to. So even if the Human Rights Act were repealed, that basically incorporates the convention into UK law. The convention is still there, and the government still has to respect our rights under the convention. So it's not, Brexit isn't really going to have much.
It's wondering if it will become more difficult to fly or easier.
That's going to be more a question in relation to EU free movement, and it's a sort of separate question. And that, yes, there may be some implications if the UK does leave the EU in relation to freedom of movement or so potentially. But we just don't know.
Well, I do feel that if we were to leave Europe, Muslims would be worse off. For Muslims, I'm talking about in particular because this is a group that's under a huge amount of scrutiny right now. Human rights, one of the major ones that protect a lot of things that we can do. And even if the government, with the domestic laws, can enact certain things, it's still going to be challenged through European courts. If it does leave, it cannot be challenged in the same way. Through international courts it can be. That's my fear. But the biggest fear is, I believe, I'm completely opposed to Britain exiting European Union. I think it's going to be very silly. So knowing that political hat, or wearing that, I would say it's very important for us to recognise the implication on liberty and our freedom to move. When I had just had revocation of my passport, of my visa in America, I drove from Spain through France to England without even being stopped by a single person. And at the back of my mind, I was very worried. What if they say, sorry, you can't go through? Your name appears on America's list. But no, nobody did. In France, they said welcome, and in Spain, they said welcome, so it was okay. So my fear is, it's going to get worse. That's my fear.
Okay, I think we've got around about 2 minutes left now, and so we've got time for about one more question. I'm going to go to the gentleman over here who has his hand up.
My question relates to radicalization question. Does it come under the Schedule 7? For example, schools and universities are requested to report only or if they detect any radicalization. So how do they define radicalization? Even today's Evening Standard, there is a report on other universities being uncooperative in terms of their
So the question is around the sort of the legal duty of schools and universities and public officials to report people where they maybe detect or maybe they should be detecting some sign of radicalisation.
What are they looking for?
Is that in any way related to Schedule 7?
I can answer that quite shortly. No, it isn't. It's something separate. So Schedule 7 is only in relation to police powers at ports of entry and exit. Other aspects of the government's anti-terror strategy or prevent fall outside of that. So it falls outside the scope of Schedule 7.
But is it still something that's sort of governed and regulated in fashion, sort of under the Terrorism Act, or does it come under sort of other legal mechanisms?
It's different. My understanding is different legal mechanisms in relation to. I think what you're referring to is prevent strategy. And I believe over the weekend, I think the National Union of Teachers actually objected to it. So my understanding isn't actually associated with Terrorism Act and powers. It's just something, a strategy the government is trying to deploy under the guise of anti-terrorism. So it's quite separate in essence.
It did become a problem. It did become a problem in the school. The teachers were told that it is part of the law of the land that they must report. We didn't even talk about the Snoopers Charter. We didn't talk about the extraordinary surveillance that the government was undertaking. Remember in Birmingham, where the cameras were set up without consulting, without taking permission, without telling people that to be taken down after spending lots of money. Schools, the extremist speakers list that you've talked about. There's a whole host of problems that are happening beyond Schedule 7. We should be aware of it, and we should all be very robust against such measures. Who is an extremist speaker? Who is it that they want to include or exclude? There are violent extremists, non-violent extremists. Apparently, anyone who criticizes government's foreign policy now has become a non-violent extremist. Hello, what's going on? I mean, who is going to be excluded from this? So this is, forgive me for using the name, Michael Gove's drive. He has this particular agenda that he's been driving since his book on Celsius 7. Do you remember that book he wrote? Celsius 7, I think, or what was it called? Celsius something. Straight after July the 7th bombing in London, he wrote a book. In that book, he squarely blames Islam for the London bombing. And everything Michael Gove has done in every single government department has been to apportion Islam the blame of extremism, terrorism, and every ill that is happening in this country. To me, his influence in government is toxic, but he's got a very strong influence with many other friends of his who are within the government and currently the media. An example, LBC used to call me up very often for a particular show. Michael Gove, later on I find out, is the best friend of that particular presenter. And I wrote an article exposing Michael Gove. The very next day, I was told, you are out, you will never be called again because this particular presenter has taken a disliking to you. And I asked why. And I was told because you criticized Michael Gove. So this kind of tentacles that they use to keep their influence, it's very frightening, it's very worrying, but I want to confront them. I want to have a rational debate with them if they want to have a conversation. I want to fight for our rights. I want us to do the same. Don't shy away from standing up. Just like as the National Union of Students have said, get lost with your prevent agenda. Just like the Walthamstow Mosque Council have said to the government, you can go to hell with your prevent agenda, we're not interested. Every single person in this country should say, we're not interested in this divisive policies. What we're interested in is in creating an inclusive policy so that we can actually root out radicals from our communities and create a space where we can all roam free and be happy about it. Currently we're not. We are being pitched one against the other, and that's not helping anybody.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, Ajmal, and thank you indeed, Yvonne, for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, though, we must leave it because we're running out of time and we need to wrap up now. But thank you very much once again to our speakers for coming and sharing their insights and thoughts on this topic. No doubt the discussion and the debate will go on. You can follow us on Twitter and add further thoughts, those of you who didn't get to speak.